So who here want to be an architect at some point? Just like show of hands, come on. Be honest, that's right. Okay, right about now, I should see everyone's hands shown, because for the amount of times someone said to me, like, I want to be an architect one day, I swear to God, it usually ends with me saying, well, thank God you didn't. But to be honest, I really love what I do, and I was really excited to come here and speak to normal people, because normally I'm speaking to people in real estate, prop tech, or design geeks. So I was trying to think, well, how can I connect to normal people, but you guys aren't really normal because it's Sunday and you came to Cerebral Gyms to exercise your minds. So I thought maybe what I'll do is take the subtle lessons I've learned from the success of my business, and hopefully you guys can get a takeaway from that. So these are the kind of the 4 headlining topics. But before we go into all that, I kind of want to talk about this wave, which is called digital disruptions, and it's very simple. Basically, it's a real, well, for as long as we've known it, we've had a real top-down approach to the way things were made in terms of decisions, whether it was like government, or usually it's whoever had the most money, they would make the decisions, and then the people underneath follow. Well, now that we've got technology, technology is this awesome tool that's disrupting every industry because it gives even the little Joe Schmo the voice of millions. It has this amazing way to harness millions and millions of people with social influence to basically change industries. And I don't really need to, go through how many industries have been completely shaken by this. It's going to continue to happen, and these are digital disruptions. So we need to really ask ourselves in the consumer world, what is it that people want? And I kind of call this looking for the cracks. So up here are just a bunch of graphs. If you were to look at them in detail, all it's saying is one of the digital disruptions that we're having in the real estate industry is the fact that in the workspace, there's just a lot more freelance workers. There's a lot more workers that are contracted. There's people such as James that go from their corporate jobs to something a lot more creative in the creative industry. So if we look at, let's say, the serviced office space, a lot of times when you start a business, it's all about timing. So I'm sure that when the creators of the serviced office space came about, they weren't like, oh, in 2008, we're going to have this huge, credit crisis where the housing bubble is going to collapse and people are going to go into freelancing, or were they thinking, there's going to be this huge rise in people needing smaller spaces and these freelancing mobile workers. So since 2005 till now, there's been 20 million new freelance jobs creating, and it's on the rise. So because this has been so popular, it's really disrupted the traditional office space, which is large and inflexible and long. And then on the opposite end, you've got the serviced office space, which is full of environment, it's flexible, it's easy. And I think the real reason why everyone's kind of flooding and developing that right now is because actually they're charging you 3 times more for the same amount of space, but you would have never known that because all this beautiful marketing and branding has packaged it as you're getting a 2, 3, or 4 person space plus all this other stuff that you didn't even know you needed. This is my symbol for annoying neighbor. God, it's you again. Okay, so when you're one person, yeah, this is pretty cheap. You get everything you need, you can come in and out, you didn't have to build your own office, and that's great. But when you're about like 10 to 100 people, that is really expensive because you can just go next door and you can get 2.5 times the amount of people with the same price. And you don't want all this noise because all it's doing is it's bothering you, and you don't want to hear the noisy neighbors, and you don't want the parties. You kind of want your own sign on the front door, and you want to say, hey, I've outgrown the serviced office space. I'm in actually a real office right now. So this middle size between 10 and 100 people is actually 52% of this market. So we call this a huge opportunity, a huge window right here that nobody's looking at because nobody's looking at the cracks. They're all flooding to what seems to be very, very viable and making huge margins, and they're not looking at the future. So if you look at that middle segment, you have to think, what do people want? What do people care about? That's easy. We care about time and money. So if we're to take the middle market and make it a lot more flexible and cheap. That means we have to give them the bare minimum, which would be desks, data, and flexibility. So by giving them the bare minimum, the landlord or the operator is able to fit it out at a much lower price than all the bells and whistles. So when I told my colleagues that we'd be moving to a place that would look like this, the looks on their faces kind of told me that they weren't going to be so happy about this. So we started to think, okay, well, how can we impact in the cheapest, most effective way the desk? The desk, this rectangular desk, hasn't really been innovated on for probably as long as we know, and it's not even ergonomically efficient for the way we work. So we started to look at the desk, and we started to think, okay, how can we make these desks a lot more flexible, a lot more modularly collaborative? Because flexibility these days is all about how we can make one unit turn into multiple functions. And after working with a number of tech CEOs, we started to realize that every business has a number of sectors that all want to work and harness their ideas in many different ways in many different groups. And some wanted more silence, some wanted a lot more noise and buzz. And we started to create modularity and even introduce things like this, which was adding kind of greenery and well-being and planting into the environment. So we came up with this whole new system of desks, and our offering is this. If you're a developer or a landlord and you want to find a way to service the middle market, this is the most flexible, most price-effective way to do it without competing with people on either ends of the market. And I think my point in showing this to you is just to show you a way that a really small idea can lead into very big change. So if you're out there thinking well, what can I do? I'm not a techie, how can my ideas create some gravitas? You really got to look for the cracks, and you got to take the plunge, and you could actually, with the tiny desks and some ideas, start to create the middle market. But you would have to be a market leader to do that. You can't be a follower. So that is what I'm calling looking for the cracks. And if you would like to buy a desk, you can contact us at www.dhliberty.com. Thank you very much. So the second one is don't wait to be asked. I'm calling this microtrend number 2. So again, I'm going to show you tons of data. And it's funny, yeah, data exists, but a lot of this is also intuition. Anyone in London knows that it's bloody expensive, people are single for longer, people cannot afford to live without flat shares, there's this housing supply that's decreasing. So all of these things are normal. You got guys partying till they're 60 years old at clubs. Everyone knows this, and probably they're going to keep going, right? So why is living in cities, why is it so expensive? It's pretty actually common sense. It's because there's no land, the cost of construction is really high, and it's super inflexible. Second to last topic I'm going to talk about is what I call punching above your weight. Now, for anyone who's an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur, this is something that I've always done. I think my partners now still make fun of me for doing it, but I'll give you a few examples. When I started my company, we're 5 years old now, but in year 1, I started to always use the word we. So I'd go out and I'd be like, yes, well, we can do this, we can do that. And my clients would be like, who's we exactly? And I'd be like, well, it's me and my free intern. We can do this. And then I remember my first website, I had look, we've got this London headquarters, and we've got an office in Shanghai. But that was really my sister's mailing address. So there's this idea that you got to punch above your weight. You have to do things that you want to do, and I kind of see that as this is really funny, but I always think of it as farming. I'm putting seeds down for where I want to go, and you don't see a plant growing yet, but one day you'll go there and you'll find a tree, and you'll know, and you'll remember oh yes, that was a seed that I had planted a while ago, and so the next few slides is just a few projects that we're currently working on or that are currently getting built that were always much bigger than I had ever envisioned, but there are things that we went for and that we got and that we continue to plant seeds of. So this is a park square, and it's a project where we're blending public landscape, infrastructure, transportation and parkland kind of all into one, and also commercial space. In 2020, the bike superhighway is going to zip across here. See a little guy on the bicycle? And what we did was we took a park and we zipped a slice through it, and we brought light down so that it could seep into the commercial spaces so that it's lettable. And here's the design vision of where it is right now. And so it's going to be a combination of F&B and commercial and usable landscape. So you can see how it starts to bring in activities into the bottom areas, and how the landscape starts to striate itself to become terraces that people can sit on. And the corner is like this big funnel that starts to bring the community down, and they can sit on the steps where it creates an amphitheater where the movie's projected on the opposite side, and we create this amazing landscape in the ground. So for anyone who's ever been to Hong Kong or Japan, they know what a three-dimensional city it is. The city doesn't just exist on the ground, it exists on the ground, on the bottom, and on the top. So London is very, very one-dimensional. And as we grow and as it becomes infiltrated with a huge population, we're gonna have to start looking at three-dimensional cities. The second project I'm going to show is, sorry, that slide obviously didn't come through very well, is a project that we're doing in China. It is 52 stories, and it has 10 companies within it. And the reason why I love working in China is because they're always like, haha, you don't have a budget. And that's like something that like we are not used to, because usually it's always like budget, time, money, budget, time, money. And so it's great because every floor has something unique and special. On this floor in particular, we decided to, and by the way, every company in here deals with fashion and technology. On this floor in particular, we decided to cut through a triple height space and make the longest clothing rail in the world because we wanted the whole company to see what it is that they're working on. And so they use this huge stairway where they interact and they can meet on it, and the buyers can come in and they can see the clothes, and it's flowing throughout the space. And in this space, these boxes become meeting rooms, they become display space. People can sit on here and have meetings, but it also becomes circulation to go to the next floor.
Question for you. You mentioned earlier about London, Japan and sort of China being 3D cities. What is London? I mean, is London really far behind in terms of that, that 3D aspect? And what could we be doing more, or should the government be doing more to try and help?
That's a really good question, because as much as I don't want to blame government for most decisions, I'm going to blame government for most decisions, because the restraints to our cities are a lot of times based by issues that go far beyond designers. There are issues to deal with taxes, there are issues to deal with planning, with regulations. On one end of the spectrum, you could say, hey guys, we're really lucky. We have a city that's looked the same for hundreds of years, and that is a blessing, because I'm a huge believer in preservation and like the beauty of culture and the beauty of place. On the second hand, I think like, why are we so behind? Like, if you go to Hong Kong, they've got travelators that have been there forever, and they're basically vertical elevators that take you to a second landscape where you've got basically commercial spaces and like glass store frontages on the third level. I mean, how awesome is that? Imagine duplicating your commercial real estate value by simply adding a second tier. Like the transportation of the way people walk in the air is so much more fluid. The way that people efficiently get to point A to point B without having to use, the bus or an underground is so much more efficient. Everybody loves to walk there. And I was thinking, like, why can't we take these ideas into London? Why can't we start to blend a lot of the old and new? I think in the square mile, where, bank in the city is happening, you see a lot of these big towers and urban developments, but there's still a lot of constraints around them. Like, there's only a certain percentage we could allow into resi because of lighting issues and privacy issues. But I mean, I lived in New York, I've lived in Tokyo, I've lived in different cities. I can tell you that people appreciate the nuances of being around really different and opposite things kind of smashed into one. And if we're going to like continue to be a world city and really thrive in both finance, now tech, and be a world leader, I think we need to start to try and give government a lot of new ideas so that they start to think about these things. So it's going to be, I think, a one-on-one relationship. It's going to be us, the people, with ideas and, feeding it back to them as much as it's going to be with them resisting us. So I think we just need to keep on thinking and traveling and getting ideas and then, creating Kickstarters to get the government thinking. I mean, with Viva Haus, it's exactly what we're doing. This is not something they know about. It's a totally new thing. They look at it and they're like, what is this, But if we can create solutions to urban problems with just, good ideas, why not try?